Good morning, members and visitors and members of the public who may be watching this meeting. It's the BCP Western Planning Committee, and it's Thursday, the 23rd of May, 2024. In accordance with the Constitution, and as I am the chairman of the council, I shall be presiding over the first few items of business on today's agenda up to the point of the election of the chair for this committee. Firstly, I'll ask the Democratic Services Officer to read out the housekeeping rules, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Please note this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chair. For those in the room, please note if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point at the War Memorial in the gardens opposite the front of this building in Bourne Avenue. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on your laptops. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Now, moving on to the agenda items for the meeting. Item 1, apologies. Do we have any apologies, please?
We do. We have an apology from Councillor Cameron Adams, and just to cover item 2, substitute members, we have no substitutes today.
Right, thank you very much. We move on to item 3, which is in fact the election of the chairman of the Planning Committee. This is the municipal year 2024-25. Right, I'm going to look around the room and seek nominations for the election of the chair. Yes, Councillor? Do you have a seconder for that, Councillor Clements? Oh, yes, I'm sorry, I was looking totally in the wrong directions there. Right, that's nominated and seconded Councillor de Povelin. Any more nominations? Well, members, I think then one nomination is received and seconded, so the nominated councillor is duly elected. So congratulations, councillor, and I hand over at this point.
So thank you, everybody. Welcome to the people who are new to this committee, or rather new to BCP Planning Committee, who were not on the Planning Committee last year. We've got 2 or 3 new people, so welcome, and welcome back to some who've previously been on committee. So now we move on to the election of vice chair. I'm going to take chairman's prerogative and nominate Councillor Joe Clements. Have I got a seconder for that? Thank you. Are there any other nominations? In that case, thank you, and Councillor Joe Clements is duly elected. So now she will move up and sit up here. In fact, I ought to move down one. Thank you. Now we can get down to the rest of the meeting, and First of all, I'd like the members of the committee to introduce themselves. In fact, not just members of the committee, but everyone present. Start with myself, Councillor Marion Le Pedvin, Councillor for Newtown and Heatherlands. On my left.
Councillor Jo Clements, Penhill Ward.
Councillor Simon McCormack, Burton and Grange.
John Challoner, Councillor for Camford Cliffs.
Councillor Michelle Dower, Councillor for Kinston Ward.
Peter Cooper, Councillor for Hamworthy.
Kate Salmon, Councillor for Moordown.
Councillor Chapman Law for Albany and Bourne Valley.
Ryan Hitchcock, Councillor for Hamworthy. Peter Sidaway, Councillor for Broadstone.
That's the members of the committee, and as you can tell, we come from a wide range of wards, mainly in the west, but one or two from the east as well, to get a broad perspective on planning applications. And as well as the committee members, we have various council officers who I will ask to introduce themselves now. You've already heard from Jill Holyoke, who is our Democratic Services Officer, who will be taking the minutes and generally keeping us in order, does a fantastic job. And we also have other officers from planning.
Thank you, Chair. David Hodges, Development Management Manager for the Western area.
Yes, good morning, Chair. Robert Firth, Senior Solicitor.
Good morning, Monika Kwiatkowska. I'm the DM team leader for the Western area.
Thank you. And various other officers and case officers will be joining us online as at the appropriate moment. So could I ask members of the committee, has anyone got a declaration of interest on either of the applications we're looking at today? Nobody's coming forward. If anything occurs to you as we proceed, of course, bring it up at that point. So after the presentations from case officers for each of the applications before us today, we'll be hearing from any people who have applied to speak, be it members of the public, the applicants or objectors, but we'll do that as we come to them. So now we move on to the schedule of planning applications, and the first one, 7A, is Branksome Chine Cafe, Pinecliff Road. And the planning officer presenting is Laura Sims, who I hope will be joining us online. There she is. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you.
Over to you.
Okie dokie, let me just share my screen. Are we able to see that, Chair?
We can very clearly, thank you, and we can hear you clearly.
Perfect, thank you very much. Okay, so good morning. This application is for Branksome Chine Cafe, and they're applying for a variation of condition 8 to increase the opening hours of the site. Just for some background information, the proposed site is obviously Branksome Chine Cafe and is situated on Branksome Beach, south of Pinecliff Road. The site is an established cafe/restaurant with a previous application approving a large rear extension and alterations, which is shown on the right-hand side where my cursor is now, just here. The site provides a wider economic benefit as it is an established, vibrant business with within a desirable tourism area and provides an additional captured income. The current opening hours of the site are 7 AM till 11 PM, Monday to Sunday, and this application seeks to extend this to midnight on Thursday, Friday and Saturday evenings, and until 2 AM on New Year's Eve. Seeming to change. There we go. This picture here shows the eastern elevation, and it clearly shows the previous application has now been built and is in full operation, which again is where my cursor is. And the original part of the building can be seen, which is the cream rendered side here. The site is also surrounded by a large car park, This is publicly used and actively used by beachgoers and is not strictly designated for restaurant or cafe visitors, which is important to note. This is from the opposite approach. You can see how it sits on the beachfront. This photo here shows the relationship between the Branksome Tyne Cafe, which is where my cursor is, and the two of the 3 blocks mentioned within the planning report, both labelled with the names. From this orientation, we can see it's clear that both blocks are sat above the cafe and look down onto the site due to the hill. This again is just showing the position of one of the blocks from the opposing way on Tynemouth Road. And then here we are showing the aerial view with the measurements between each block using stat maps. The uphill position of the property needs to be considered, and the impact of the potential noise production due to the extended opening hours has not raised any concerns with environmental health, as there is a lack of compelling evidence to suggest significant harm at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we have no objectors registered to speak, but we do have Matt Allen.
Okay, I'm just noticing Councillor McCormack has left the room. So.
He has, and I was going to explain when we come to
Apologies.
the discussion.
Apologies.
Yes.
Okay.
It means that he will not be taking part in this item because he's had to leave the room temporarily, but we'll probably come back for the other one, the next one. But for this one, he will not be taking part. So I hand over to Matt Allen to speak on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, members. My name is Matt Annam. I'm a Chartered Town Planner and Director of Pure Town Planning, and I'm speaking in support of this application on behalf of Rockwater. The proposal, as you heard, seeks to extend the permitted opening hours by 1 hour on a Thursday, Friday and Saturday night, taking it from 11 o'clock to midnight, as well as a one-off opening hours for New Year's Eve, which would not be unusual for restaurants and other venues of this commonly celebrated evening. In the context of the core strategy, the key question in planning terms is whether the proposed slight increase in hours from that of the approved for only 3 nights a week would cause any harm to the character and appearance of the area, amenity of neighbouring residents or highway safety. In respect to those matters, as you've heard, there's been no objections from environmental health nor highways, and your planning officer and their team leader is in full support of this application. As such, we strongly feel that planning permission should be approved today in line with the officer's recommendation. The applicant considers that, given the nature of the premises being a sit-down restaurant venue, proposed extending hours can take place without any harm to the nearest residential amenities of the occupiers nearby, as you saw from still on the screen on the screen there. Extending the opening hours may actually reduce the number and concentration of people leaving the premises on closing at 11 o'clock. Because customers will tend to leave more sporadically, therefore potentially reduce the noise and disturbance. Signs have been put up instructing customers to leave quietly, and a full circuit CCTV camera system has also been installed by Rockwater inside and outside the premises to further encourage customers to behave responsibly when leaving the premises. These measures will contribute to ensuring the proposed hours extension will cause no harm to the impacts on residential amenity. The nearest flats are over 100 metres away on the top of a cliff with intervening car park and mature screening. The proposed additional hour would not add to the level of activity or create a harmful level of noise above that of the background noise. On the application form, just to add, actually, there is a retractable roof. And the manager of the group has said that they're willing to leave that closed at 11 o'clock as approved. So that the retractable roof would still be closed at 11 o'clock, not be extended to midnight. On the application form for the original restaurant, we actually requested midnight 7 days a week because this ties up with a licence, and the environmental health officer did not object to that at that time. And again, they have not objected this time. The premises have been open 9 months now, and they've not been reported any antisocial incidents, probably given the nature of the high quality restaurant, which is a good reputation and arguably a more responsible clientele when compared to other venues in the town. In addition, to alleviate any perceived noise, the Environmental Health have agreed to carry out ongoing noise monitoring. It should also remember that noise impacts are controlled and enforced by the premises licence and the lease agreement with the council. So significant and robust measures are already in place to ensure the amenity of neighbouring residents is protected. In terms of highways, BCP Highways have been consulted and are in support of the scheme, noting that the increase in numbers does not increase any covers available in the premises, and the additional hour is considered to have a minor or nominal impact on traffic movements. Councillors, in the short time Rockwater Restaurant has been open since September last year, it's quickly gained a reputation for being good food, high quality restaurant, popular with families coming together for lunch, friends catching up over dinner, as well as breakfast business meetings. It's proven to be a hit with runners, swimmers, dog walkers coming up for a coffee to warm up. So a superb family facility for local residents and the wider community. As we move into the summer season, it'll undoubtedly attract more holiday makers too. Rockwater has already made a massive contribution to the creation of a world-class beach resort, and this proposal will assist to continue to promote economic development and support tourism for the town, whilst not detrimentally impacting on the character and appearance of the area, neighbouring amenity or highway safety. I hope you agree with your officer's recommendation to grant planning permission and vote in favour of approving this proposal. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. There are no other people registered to speak. So now we open it up to the committee, and following the practice I've adopted since I became chair of planning a couple of years ago, no, last year, we'll start with questions for information. No opinions at this stage. Once we've clarified any concerns we have, any uncertainties, any further information we need, then we will turn to discussing the pros and cons of the application. So has anyone got any questions about the presentation, about anything you've seen or heard? Yes, Councillor Hitchcock.
Does the venue play music?
Can we have a, I believe it does, but I would like this confirmed by the case officer. A member of the committee is nodding, or presumably experienced it.
Yes, sir, I have.
But could the case officer confirm the details?
Chair, we don't know, but we're happy to take Councillor Chandler's view on it.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Chandler, could you enlighten us to the volume, shall we say?
I think it would be fair to say that there have been a couple of occasions when the volume has exceeded acceptable levels. Now, they did have an opening night party with an internationally renowned DJ, Fatboy Slim. Some of you here may have heard of him, and that was a loud evening, but that was their opening night, and I think they exceeded their licensing hours on New Year's Eve, although they're looking to address that within their subsequent application. I also, and they're actually the only two occasions as a ward councillor I've had any complaints about the venue in terms of their noise directly to myself. I did go and see the site operators who were very, very amenable to talking through what their plans were, that they have actually an operation in place where they check sound levels in the car park at night to make sure they adhere to the guidance and the stipulations of their licensing agreement. And as I said, I've had only those complaints from those two particular events.
Thank you. Any further questions? Yes, Councillor Chapman-Long.
Some of the representations were talking about buses and that sort of thing. Do we know what time the last bus is out of there? Anyone?
Can I have a look? But I might take a few minutes after to look at Moore's website. Hang on. That's all right.
Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Salmon.
Sorry, yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask, because Matt Allen mentioned the retractable roof and the manager having agreed to not open that past 11 p.m. Just to understand if that would be in any way conditioned, or would that be what's the word I'm looking for?
Petitioned, I think,
yeah,
is a very good word.
Thank you. I hope I'm being clear. Or it's just a sort of goodwill. Yeah, we say we'll do that, so we'll do it kind of situation. That's fine. Does that make sense?
I asked for confirmation from the officers, but I imagine if we wish to make it as a condition, we could.
Potentially, I don't. It's not something that come up, Chair. So I don't quite understand how the retractable roof works. Is it sort of electronic, something that comes out, and you can do it in a few minutes? I take it Mr. Annan is sort of indicating to me.
Yeah, to be honest. Just to clarify, to be honest, most of the year it is closed due to the temperature, so it rarely gets open till 11 o'clock. But on the permitted consent, it could be open to 11 o'clock. So just to alleviate any concerns, we tie in with the original consent that it could still be open till 11 o'clock. We wouldn't want to extend it to midnight. And as I say, for most of the year, it'll be closed long before that because people get cold.
Thank you.
So I think, yes, short answer is on the basis of understanding we could have a condition to the effect of the retractable roof shall not be open beyond the hours of 2300 hours on any one day.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Tennant.
Thank you, Chair. In the addendum, there's mention of a noise management plan. Do we know what that might involve?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so we've discussed the matter further with our environmental health officers who were worried that the initial draft condition on the recommendation might be overly onerous for the reasons that are in the addendum. So a noise management plan would be not dissimilar to the sort of plan that the applicant would have to produce under their licensing regime. So it would control hours of live music, outside music, those sorts of things. So yeah, we could run that through environmental health to make sure they're satisfied that will protect adequate noise disturbance at the nearest residential properties, which is the key test for us.
Thank you. Obviously, I imagine you've read the representations on the planning site from nearby residents and also any contacts from people who have concerns living nearby. And one of the concerns is the use of bottles going into the bin late at night and the noise that makes. Also the car park, but since it's a public car park, there's no means of knowing whether any noise is associated directly with Rockwater or other beach users or other people around. So that one is difficult to think about, but bottles emptied into bins definitely must be Rockwater. So have we got any information about that?
So, Chair, what we're trying to do is minimise those sort of external noises late at night, so there's not unreasonable disturbance. You're correct in that it's a public car park. It's not under the applicant's control to control our public car park. There will be comings and goings, but yeah, certainly noisy activities like the bottle opening. I think it's reasonable that can be restricted to times that aren't late at night or first thing. And potentially that could also be part of the noise management plan as well.
Thank you. Do you want to say something, Mr. Perth? There is
in fact already a condition on noise generating activities such as emptying bottles should not take place externally before 7 and after 10 o'clock at night. So that's condition 4.
Well, thank you. And not after 10, did you say?
That's what it says.
Right. Right, that will please the residents and perhaps we can make sure it is enforced.
Chair, in relation to the question about the buses, as best as I can discern, I think the service through there is the 50, which is the one which goes between Swanage and Bournemouth, which is very much a sort of leisure service. And according to this, the last bus is 8 o'clock. And I presume that's now the summer timetable.
That's the Chapman Law.
I was just looking at that myself. I think weekend it does go until it last one pass through there at 10, I think it is.
I was looking at today.
Yeah, so was I, and then I thought, oh, what about weekends?
Thank you. Any further questions? Yes, Councillor Cook.
I've just noticed this thing about antisocial behaviour. I just wonder how many reports they were and what type of antisocial behaviour, because it covers a wide range of activities. Thank you.
Can you help us, Mr. Hodges, or?
No. I mean, we've only got the information that's in the environmental health officer's comments and in the report. So one of the issues about the area is, as you said, it's a public car park. There's facilities there. Tends to be one of the areas of the beach where lots of people gather. So in terms of noise disturbance, any antisocial behaviour, that isn't automatically linked to the restaurant. So that could just be people on the beach. We've installed barbecues on that bit of beach, there's public toilets there. So no, in terms of the my understanding about the sort of noise activities is very much as set out by Councillor Challoner before, in terms of the, you know, I think maximum 2 events occurred, and yes, as I understand it, Environmental Health have agreed to install noise monitoring equipment in the nearest residential properties to check if there's a problem going forward.
Councillor Dan.
Hi, yeah, I'd like to understand a little bit more about the representation around the bright lights. What is the issue around lighting? What do we know what the lighting is, and are we doing anything to mitigate that?
Yeah, so because the application is a variation condition on the previous consent for the extension, that included a condition principally concerned with impact on bats. So we've taken that condition on into this consent because it will still be relevant. And yeah, so the idea is that there's a restriction on a particular intensity of light, because potentially that affects foraging bats. It's well out of my area of expertise, but I'm just relaying what I understand from the original application.
So any further questions? Right, so we'll proceed on to discussing the pros and cons of the application and whether we should approve or not. Councillor Sidwell.
Just looking at the application, I think it strikes me that the conditions they've addressed all the things that have been raised, and so the main issue would be whether the conditions are enforced fully. And if you read some of the complaints, I think it indicates that maybe they haven't been. But looking at the conditions and what they're asking for, I would see no reason not to support it. But we should encourage enforcement of them. But given the conditions that are there around lighting, around noise, both of bottles and music, and the fact that it's a car park and therefore any ASB, for example, may not be the restaurant, I don't see any reason why we would refuse this.
Thank you. Any more comments? Councillor Challoner.
Thank you, Chair. And I echo Councillor Sidwell's comments there. I think one of the challenges in this location is the proximity to some of the residential buildings. I think that they have been very good on the whole in terms of their sound management plan, and have been a responsible operator. A number of people have mentioned the challenges around parking. We know that area is quite tight for parking, but that's not something we're considering at this time. The extended hours, it's a tricky one in terms of, will that have an effect on people? Obviously, we haven't had the facility in operation during the peak season yet, so we've yet to know quite what will happen in those hot summer months, even during the currently approved hours. So it's kind of trying to guess what might go from there. But I'm actually I feel fairly well assured in terms of the plans that the operator has put in place around their sound management requirements and the conditions that we might be able to stipulate around the retractable roof and the no emptying of bottles, because actually that sound will cover quite far as well. With regards to taxis and any kind of antisocial behaviour there, I think it would be fair to say that any increase in that kind of activity is going to be driven by that operator being in that location. That again is something to consider, but overall I feel reasonably assured in terms of what they're doing and what they put in place.
Thank you. Just on the noise generation, it is already in as condition 4, so that's already covered with enforcement, of course. Councillor Clements.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree largely with what's already been said. And I think the key here is that the noise management plan is completely watertight and is totally adhered to at all times. I don't think antisocial behaviour is going to be a problem because, well, no, it is a problem, but I don't think it will be in relation to Rockwater, because the fact that Rockwater is there is not going to attract the type of people that are going to be antisocial. They're going to be there for other reasons, not because they want to cause trouble at Rockwater. So I think that's a whole separate issue that for another day. But yeah, I think it should be fine as long as the noise is controlled.
Taking up the point Councillor Challoner made about we haven't had a full summer season, particularly with the new timings, it is an option we might wish to take up, that we make this as a trial run for a certain limited period to be reassessed in view of circumstances. So if anyone wants to make that possible amendment.
I'd be more than happy to put that amendment forward, Chair, and that's a really good idea, and I thank you for that. And I think that would probably help to reassure residents who are possibly fearing what might happen during the busy months, and to know that it's going to come back and be reviewed, I think would be rather good.
So we have to decide what period we set it for. 6 months.
Chair, if I could,
June, July.
if possible, our recommendation would be a 12-month. And the reason for that is got a seasonal use, you're going to have peaks and troughs. The difference between Thursday night in November is going to be very different to one in August. But also it allows you to deal with the additional hours over New Year's Eve, for example, and allows you to make an assessment of the impacts of that. So a 12-month period we would recommend gives you a very good picture of the actual impacts over the course of the year.
Okay, so do you want to formalise your amendment? Then we'll vote on the amendment before we vote on the substantive.
Chair, can I just clarify? If Councillor Challoner wants to move the officer recommendation and then add a condition regarding temporary consent and perhaps around the retractable roof, that is the main motion. So it's not, because nobody's actually moved anything yet. So you don't need to vote on an amendment unless,
okay,
if Councillor Challoner is happy to include that in his move. Thank you.
It sounds like a positive way forward. So in which case, I'd like to move that we support this recommendation, but add the condition with regards to reviewing the operation after 12 months.
Thank you. Be closed at 11, as has been promised, but let's formalise it. Okay.
Chair.
Oh, sorry. Just for my benefit, is the retractable roof on the first floor terrace? Is that correct? Thank you. Then that's how.
Chair, just to be clear, so two things actually. So the resolution will be to grant a temporary consent effectively.
Yes.
It will be controlled by condition, but it's essentially a 12-month.
But also the retractable roof.
But
the retractable roof closing at 11.
And I was going to say, I think there's also some condition changes recommended in the addendum. So if you're happy to take those on board as well.
And I saw Councillor Fiddleway.
Yeah, I have a question now that's only because this has come up, whether it should be, or whether there is a possibility to link it to their licence. So in terms of, if you're going to review it, why would you not review it at the point that their licence is due at the same time, so you don't have a double review?
I don't think
Does it strike with the reason
that, although it sounds sensible, I don't think it's feasible because we're two completely different
if I can
bodies.
just give an example, the reason I suggest it is I know of one restaurant in my own ward where licensing and planning certainly weren't talking to each other and ended up with two different sets of rules that should have been tied together, and so it just seemed to make sense. That's why I suggested it.
Sure. I was just going to yes, I mean the basic principle is planning should do planning and licensing should do licensing. I think the key thing is the criteria that licensing apply are different to the planning, and one of the key things is about how the planning will run with the land. So one of the reasons why a trial run is not a bad idea is once it's granted, that will last for any operator who comes in and uses it as a restaurant till midnight for their on it. So yes, yeah, I understand the point, but actually we need to keep the processes separate in this instance.
Okay, so I don't know that we've actually had a move as such. Yeah. Right, so yes, have we had a seconder?
I'll second.
Oh,
Yeah,
loads
anyone
of them.
second it, yeah.
Sure, let's say Councillor Hitchcock. I think I saw his hand first, but there were others. Okay, so I put it to the vote. If you wish to approve this application with the additional conditions of closing the retractable roof at 11 every night, whatever the opening hours are, and of the trial to be reviewed in 12 months' time, please vote.
Sorry, and the addendum conditions.
And the addendum, yes, and the addendum. Well,
Yes,
that's already conditioned, so we don't need to specifically add that. So if you're in favour of all that, please vote now.
Okay, that is unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. So no abstentions, no votes against. I wonder if, Peter, you're the nearest. Could you see if Simon's able to join us to move on to the next? I presume he's just outside somewhere. Okay, we'll proceed then. So we move on to item 7B, which is 13 to 15 High Street Pool. Again, it's not a new application. It's an application that was agreed some time ago, but there are certain things to look at now. And I believe, Mr. Hodges, you're dealing with this one.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, so this application originally came to the BCP committee, but actually most of the members wouldn't have been on the committee at that time. But the scheme was resolved to be approved subject to completion of a legal agreement. That was back in December 22. Unfortunately, there was a delay in issuing the original instructions for the legal agreement due to resourcing issues within the authority. However, the process for trying to complete the agreement has been ongoing now since August of 2023, and the finalised agreement has been with the applicant since October 2023. This is now the second oldest application BCP is currently considering, and we're keen to try and bring the matter to a conclusion. The Section 106 agreement for us is a fairly straightforward one of typical Harbour and Heathland's contributions, along with a modest NHS contribution and an overage clause to review the viability of the scheme. So it's not an agreement that we think is particularly complex or difficult to complete. So we're concerned that about the time delay that's now taken to complete the agreement, and in order to try and conclude the matter in some form of satisfactory manner, we come back to you to recommend that the application be refused due to the failure to complete the agreement. We have to take the matter back because the resolution of the committee was obviously to grant subject to completion of the agreement, but as of yet we haven't been able to do that, so we're returning the matter with recommendation for refusal, Chair.
Thank you. And looking at the attenders when this was agreed, there is nobody present who was on the committee then. I was a member of the committee, but I wasn't actually at the meeting. So we are all new to this. I don't know whether that's a good thing or not. Maybe not. Anyway, but the only person we've got registered to speak is Mr. Giles-Moore on behalf of the applicant.
Good morning, members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the applicant. I must stress that the applicant does not have any objection to the clauses within the Section 106 agreement and is not seeking to challenge the level or scope of the contributions. It's understood that the application is before you today as a result of the instructions of the Council's Planning Improvement Board. Whilst it's welcome that the Council is seeking to improve the delivery of its planning service, it cannot be right that the Improvement Board is focused on the quantitative outputs purely to enable senior officers to relay that the backlog of planning applications has reduced. It's important to understand the context as to why the Section 106 agreement has not yet been completed. The planning application was recommended for approval at the 4th of October 2022 Planning Committee, and despite significant chasing, the applicant did not receive the Section 106 agreement in its final form until November 2023, over a year later. And this is having paid the council's legal fees for producing the Section 106 agreement. Given these delays in the council issuing the Section 106 agreement, to now seek to refuse the application would be unreasonable. Officers have been informed that work is progressing on the Section 106 agreement to be signed by the relevant parties, and this work includes the appointment of a chartered surveyor at an additional cost to the applicant. The delays in the council issuing the Section 106 agreement, as you're aware, over 1 year to issue the agreement, has meant that commercial terms have had to be renegotiated, hence the appointment of the surveyor. These negotiations are close to a conclusion. Given the reason why the Section 106 agreement has not been signed is directly related to Council's delay in issuing the agreement, again, just to reiterate, over a year to issue the agreement, it would be unreasonable for the Council to progress with this proposed refusal. It's also important to understand that the applicant sought pre-application advice from the Council prior to submitting the application, and after a period of 8 months, no formal response had been received to the pre-application request, and as such, the application had been submitted without the pre-application response. There have been 5 separate planning officers assigned to this planning application, and there's been an extremely protracted determination process. To reiterate, the delay in the council issuing the Section 106 agreement has meant that commercial terms have had to be renegotiated with the interested parties. This is the sole reason why to date the Section 106 agreement has not been completed, and this is a direct consequence of the delays in issuing the Section 106 agreement. Furthermore, for additional context, the applicant is still awaiting a response to a pre-application advice on an alternative site, a different site within BCP Council, and this request for pre-application advice was submitted in September 2023. Surely the Planning Improvement Board should be questioning why this advice, which the applicant has paid for, has not been issued. In conclusion, it is requested that given the context of this application and the chronology of events, the application is not refused and the applicant is provided with additional time to complete the Section 106 agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moy. And so we move on to questions, and I want to kick off. Mr. Hodges, the amounts of money that were stipulated in the original agreement for the 106 for the Heathlands, NHS, all that sort of thing, are the amounts still the same, or has there been a change?
So both the Heathlands and the Poole Harbour contributions are index linked, so they go up in line with inflation each April. However, as a pragmatic approach, where we've already got an instruction out and an agreement in process, we wouldn't normally increase those fees. We'd only increase those fees on a new instruction from the 1st of April onwards.
So, in other words, nothing has changed on what the applicant would have been expecting following the approval at Planning Committee in October 22.
Yeah, no. So no material changes. So we haven't changed the policy. The SPDs, the Heathland and the Poole Harbour SPDs are the same, and my understanding is the NHS's position is the same in terms of their contribution. So no, there's no additional additions or subtractions to the agreement.
Thank you. Any questions, councillors?
What discussions have taken place between the planning department and the applicant regarding an extension of this timeline now?
So because the application is one of the longest standing ones, and it's part of an improvement process with the senior management to try and conclude these, discussions have been ongoing with the applicant and agent about completing the agreement. You've heard the position of the agent as to why it's not been signed. As the contributions are a known amount, and they've been a known amount for some time, even if it is necessary to renegotiate the terms of the option on the site, we don't understand why that stops the applicant completing the agreement, because it's a known amount in terms of the cost of developing the site. So I think this is our concern about not being given a date for the completion of the agreement and why it's continued to drift for a number of months.
Happy? Yeah. Any further questions? Okay, so Councillor Dow.
So this is me being a new member of this committee and probably a little bit naive question. If we did sort of say, actually, we're going to withdraw this permission, what would be the next step? What would happen after that?
So in principle, agreement's been given to the application, but it needs this essential mitigation for its impact on habitat sites. Fundamentally, we're still in favour of redeveloping the site. It's a key site in the historic town centre. We want to see it redeveloped at some point. It's open for the applicant to reapply, and we can reconsider the application on its merits.
Councillor Cooper.
I'll mirror, Michelle, I'm a little bit kind of naive in this, but in terms of the housing needs of Poole and the redevelopment of the high street, is the affordable housing being considered in any way, or dwellings for single people or, families in need, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so if you look at the original report, you can see that the viability was assessed at the time. The conclusion was it wasn't sufficiently viable, but we have included in the agreement what we call an overage clause, so the ability to go back and reassess whether the scheme could viably produce or make an affordable housing contribution later in the future. So if a permission gets granted, they've got 3 years to implement. 3 years' time, the economic picture may be different, maybe more viability in the scheme, and it allows us to look afresh at whether we can claw back an affordable housing contribution at a late stage.
Councillor Clements.
Thanks, Chair. Okay, so I'm just asking the question. I'm not suggesting that this should happen in any way, but it does sound like it's been a pretty long drawn out, well, it has been a long drawn out procedure here. And would it be an option at all if we were to say to the applicant, okay, we'll give you 3 months, that's it, come up with the solution, or that would be it. Is that an option or not really?
Yes, potentially. Yes. The only thing we would say is as part of that, is put a definitive date on. So where are we? June, July, August, 1st of September, 31st of August, but delegate to the head of planning to refuse the application if it's not, the legal agreement's not completed by that date, and then we don't have to come back to you.
Councillor Chapman.
Has the applicant given us any clue as to when they could get 106 sorted? If we did, could we timeline of what they believe is possible?
No, I think that's part of the reason for trying to bring the matter to a conclusion is that we weren't being given a clear date by which time they thought it would be able to be concluded. If they had said to us, yeah, we'd conclude within the next month, clearly we wouldn't bother doing this. So I think it's the open-ended nature which is our concern, and which is why we want to draw a line under it somewhere. But if we draw a line under it in 3 months' time, the applicant's clear on the committee's view on the matter, aren't they?
Yes, follow up.
So how long would you say would be a reasonable amount of time for them to get this sorted?
Good question. Often it depends on the landowners involved, and sometimes it can be complicated by whether a bank needs to sign. Some banks are slow to deal with in these matters. But bearing in mind the length of time that the agreement has been with the applicant overall, we think it's reasonable to have completed it by now, which is why we're here. So yes, certainly an additional 3 months. We're struggling to see why that wouldn't be an entirely reasonable period to complete the agreement. Yeah.
Councillor Dow.
Another newbie question. So they received their Section 106 document in November 23. How long is your expectation for those conditions to be met? What's the normal length of time?
Yes, again, so we meet monthly with our colleagues in legal services who do this process, and some of the agreements are very, very straightforward. So they're designed to be kind of straightforward because we do a lot of them. Every residential scheme attracts these mitigation payments. Some are much more complicated because they have clauses in which get negotiated and debated on. So I'm going to not answer your question because there isn't a kind of obvious time frame for being able to complete it.
But from what you've said, this is on the straightforward end of the spectrum.
That would be my view, yes.
And has been known about ever since permission was granted in October 22.
Since the resolution, yes, yeah.
So no surprises, in other words.
November 23.
That was 22.
That was when the draft was issued. But the actual agreement of the figures would have been at the committee back in 22.
Yeah. If you read the minutes from 22, the figures are built in, which is why
I did.
Any changes.
I went through them. I think the dates are just surprising that it's so far apart.
I agree, and I have taken this up with officers as to why the delay, but we are where we are. And as I say, the applicant has known what was going to be in the 106 since October 22, even if they hadn't physically got the document. Councillor Challen.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. Were we to support the recommendation and to refuse this application, and they then reapplied, would the Section 106 fund or amount change were they to reapply?
Yes, yeah, because I think we would then be looking at the index-linked increased amounts, which would have gone up once we issued the draft decision in November 23. They would have gone up in April 24. The other issue is we would have to go back out to consultation, and we wouldn't be able to tell you off the top of our heads what the NHS contribution might be requested either. So they may have different criteria and they may seek a different amount as well. So that would be an unknown in a fresh application. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we've got a motion from the Vice Chair, have we?
Sorry, Chair. Can we have debate first?
Oh, sorry. I was thinking that was debate.
It did sort of move to debate.
Sort of morphed into debate. Right, debate. If anyone wants to debate, Councillor Challen.
I think actually I think the idea or the suggestion from our Vice Chair in terms of a set deferment date is the only other option we should consider. So it should either be an absolute pushback and we'll support the officer recommendation, or we give that very finite extension and let the officers, the head of planning, make that final call. I don't think there should be anything else that we should be considering at this time.
Councillor Cooper and then Councillor Dower.
Yeah, just swiftly, I take it the word viable throughout the document means profit in terms of money, or are there different definitions of what viable is? I'd just like to know that conversation.
Yes, yeah, I mean, there's a whole sort of raft of government guidance on assessing viability as part of the National Planning Practice Guidance, and that sets out lots of criteria for that. And so, for example, built into that is a reasonable expectation of the profit level. I'm doing this from memory, so it's while I looked at it, but I think they set that at around 15 to 20%. So it's a surplus beyond what's as a set by government as a reasonable profit expectation. But then if you want more detail on that, I can find you the bits of the MPG.
Yeah, that'd be really helpful.
Yeah.
And is there only one definition of viability when it comes to planning? So in terms of, enhancing the community and creating social value in that way, or is it always just about how much money the developer can make out of the development?
It's an assessment on financial viability. Yes, it's directed in that way. But yeah, I'm happy to get you the links to the detailed guidance.
And Councillor Dow.
Yeah, so another new question. So for me, it seems that if we sort of withdrew it from now, it's going to be a lot of time to go through that whole process again. And will that benefit? Who will that benefit? You know, if we've got everything there now, and if we can put a limited time, is it possible, for example, that we index link it at the same time? Or do we say, or if that's not possible, then I just think it's disadvantaging the neighbourhood and everyone if we have to go through that whole process again. That's what I'm thinking. But that question about index linking, if it's set periods.
So yes, doing this from memory, but my understanding is all of the payments are index linked in the agreements themselves. So the permission lasts for 3 years. If you don't implement for the first 3 years, you'll pick up an increased payment down the line.
Councillor Sidaway.
I think the proposal is absolutely the right answer and that we should have a deferment. I think my concern is that having taken this long, we don't know the detail of what is holding them up, whether it's substantial or not, and whether therefore it can be achieved in 3 months. So I think, as you said, if there's issues with getting bank sign off and things like that, we don't understand that. So I think my question is whether 3 months is enough. I know we don't want to go for too long, but how do we establish that it is achievable in 3 months? And should there be a stage, should we give delegate authority for them to agree an achievable date rather than put just a date that seems like a good idea at the time when we don't really know the facts?
That's a fair point. I think if it was brought to our attention that there was a genuine impediment to completion in that 3 months. I'll give you an example. You may recall the committee dealt with an application for paddle courts at the East Dorset Tennis Club. That was subject to agreement to rescind a previous consent. When we went to the tennis club to say, can you sign this agreement? All those agreements were held in the names of particular trustees, a number of whom all passed away. So the tennis club has had to redo their trustees to people who are alive, who can then complete the agreement. So it's only when we dig into the details of the ownership sometimes that it's typically about the ownership that causes delays in these issues. If there was a fundamental problem, absolutely we can come back and say, we've got this resolution. We don't really want to come back again, but we can see there's a compelling reason. We're nearly there. Please can we allow an extra month or this issue? We can always come back to you.
Okay, I think that's a key point to. I don't know how we log that, because it does strike me, as has been said, that to get this far with all the effort that everybody's put in on both sides, to then throw that away and do it all again, and the cost associated with that would seem a huge waste. So I think that's appreciated.
But from what you're saying, Mr. Hodges, there has been nothing from the applicant to give a good reason for not completing, such as the case of the change of trustees and that sort of thing.
Yes, I think so. I mean, I think we wouldn't be here if we felt that the reason we were giving were compelling reasons why the agreement hadn't been signed. So I think our position is there isn't a compelling reason why the agreement, or we haven't been provided with that at this stage.
Thank you. In that case, I'm happy to move that we agree to an extension of 3 months till the end of August, 1st of September deadline, and delegate authority to act thereafter to the officers as appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, Chair, I think that captures the essence of it. Essentially, what you're doing is proving the application, delegating power to the head of planning, subject to the head of planning entering into a 106 agreement within a 3-month period or whatever date specified, and also delegating power of the head of planning thereafter to refuse the application of 106.
Let's say, I said 1st of September, let's say 31st of August, spell it out. So as of the 1st of September, if it's not done, the situation has changed. Yeah. Okay. So those in favour of... Also, sorry. I'm not on the ball today. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Thank you. I think we've got lots of seconders, so I'm not sure who, wait for the minutes to see who's credited. So those in favour of accepting a deferment till the 31st of August.
Church, it's not a deferment.
No, an extension, sorry.
It's effectively an
extension.
Approval, but.
Yeah, an extension. If the 106 is not in place by the 31st of August, authority is delegated to the head of planning and appropriate officers to act accordingly. So those in favour vote now.
Unanimous, Chair.
So thank you, everybody. 2 unanimous decisions, very unusual. So now we move on to looking at the committee protocols, which you also have in your papers. We have the protocols for public speaking at planning committee, for site visits and for pre-app presentations, which have been very, very rare since the inauguration of BCP, but we have got a protocol in place for it. So if we can find I'm trying to get to the right page of the agenda. I haven't got there yet. It's a long way down. I must be nearly there. I should have put a number in, not tried to just scroll. Aha, I think I'm getting there. No. Ah, got it. Sorry. If you would, yeah.
So the idea for today is just to confirm the existing protocols so that provisions are in place for the immediate future, but that does not mean that you can't comment on them or review them at any future point. Indeed, at the Eastern BCP Planning Committee, there was some points, some helpful pointers made about the site visit protocol in particular.
That's right.
For officers to take forward.
And I did because I was chairing it as vice chair in the absence of the chair, asked that anyone who was on both committees and had spoken at the Eastern hold back to start with, at any rate, at this meeting. But so basically it's for people who have not yet expressed an opinion. The first one we come to on page 87 is actually the site visit protocol. The speaking one was at the start of the agenda because it applies every meeting. Site visit protocol doesn't apply every time. So if you've got any thoughts about the site visit protocol, please speak now. Councillor Sidaway.
I'm not clear what's changed.
Nothing's changed. It's that we've got to, to update because we're new committees to see if we are happy with the existing protocol. We may be.
I was looking through and couldn't find anything that I thought was different.
There's no changes in the draft. This is the existing protocol. The question is whether we want to change anything or meant to make some changes. Councillor Dow.
Yeah, I haven't read through this, but quick question. So is it something that we agree as a group that a particular planning application requires a site visit?
No, normally when you get your agenda, look at what is coming up at the next meeting and put a request in that you think a site visit would be appropriate. Ideally, we would know, if you know of a major application coming up at some point, even though you don't know the date, it's open to sort of flag up that when this comes up, I think a site visit would be appropriate. But particularly when you get the agenda, have a look and request at that point. It means, as it says in the protocol, time is very tight to get it organised, so there's much warning as possible. But there is the possibility. As you may know, that certainly those of you who've been on BCP planning committees before, we have not done very many. We did the Christchurch police station twice. We did the Sang up at Throop. We did the Thistle Hotel on Poole Quay.
The waste to energy.
Yeah. I'm trying to think what else we've done. I think there's been another one. Highmore, yes. Highmore, yes. So over the time, it's not very many, but it's particularly the idea is particularly things you can't see properly from the public domain, from the road or whatever, or that it's difficult to work out exactly what is intending. So particularly a big one, you know, like the Highmore Farm, it was very difficult to envisage just from paper and walking up there what was actually planned. So, Councillor Cooper and then Councillor Challoner.
Yeah, just to pick up on one, there's an application coming up, I think, on the next planning committee, which I'll have to step outside from because residents have bombarded me with stuff. The main objection is that I put through was that I thought we should do a site visit because of the highways and byways and egress and exit and young people and children and schools in the area. And it's right on a very difficult junction. And I was told that the highways department see no problem with it. And so therefore it wasn't envisaged for it to be a problem. So I felt like it was a bit of a knockback, but in that instance, does that mean that I can say, okay, well, I still think that I need the committee to visit it at peak time, which is the most important things, either in the morning or in the day, to see how chaotic that new development might be there if it goes ahead.
Yes, and the other thing I haven't touched on is that it is possible when something comes to committee, if we haven't had a site visit, that we ask for an adjournment or a deferment in order to have a site visit. That has been done on 1 or 2 occasions.
Could I make a point on that?
Sorry?
Could I make a point? I think some of the things that have come up this morning would have been really beneficial within the training that we did. And I don't know how we can slot those in about calling something out about site visits or what you can. I know this is kind of an infinite set of circumstances, but this is all new about how what we can do at a committee. So I'm just wondering at the next training that could be taken into account.
Yeah. So this is to pass on to the officers who arrange the trainings.
Yeah.
Particularly, yes.
I thought the training was very good. I'm not criticising it.
Yes, it was. I must admit I was shocked at the training to find that there were several councillors who seemed to not even know that the call-in existed and certainly didn't know how to set about doing it. That did surprise me and worry me slightly. So that is something we've got to spread the word about.
And if I could add, it's a very complicated process as well, in terms of the constitution and why you're calling it out. And with everybody having busy lives, maybe some individual sessions could be planned where you come a Teams meeting or you come to here and you go, this is what you do if you call it out. This is the stages you go through and focus on. That makes us more competent, doesn't it, when we come to sit at a table like this?
Yeah.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah. Mr. First, did you want to say something?
Well, Chair, particularly for the benefit of new members just on site visits, I was just going to say, to explain the position. So the general assumption is on site visits that members of the planning committee will make their own way and have a look at the site. And I guess if there's particular issues, like you think it'd be useful for members informally to go and have a look at a particular time, that's something members could communicate to themselves. But as the chair indicated, by and large, site visits are seen as an exception, and they're seen as exception because really their idea is you go on site because there's things you have to see on site that you couldn't see easily from the public domain. That's the primary purpose. Or there's something really important on site that you think needs to be pointed out to members. So it's primarily for those sort of exceptional circumstances, and you'll gathered from the examples that the chair indicated, there tend to be big sites, or there's sites where there's some key points that have to be pointed out to members. And by and large, officers will either themselves or through communication with the chair usually try and pick up a number of those items, the big ones, in advance, and they'll be arranged without members, in advance of members having to think about it themselves. So officers will often take the lead. I think the problem with specific timings, trying to sort those out, is just a problem. Trying to arrange for a specific time for members to all visit at the same time, which is why I think it's probably in that case something that members could liaise amongst themselves with. So that explains the context of site visits. The other thing I was going to say, I think training is important, and I think it's a very valid point that's been made. I mean, in the past, we've provided training, and for members who haven't been able to attend, we often run individual or small group sessions to try and, if members want to take that up. And I think it's something I would say, as officer level, we're keen to progress. Generally, I think the slight challenge will be how we do it now. We've got 2 committees. And that's something which I think we'll have to think about, because obviously it's preferable just to say everything we're going to say once, and actually it's beneficial to members collectively to hear what other members are saying. Otherwise you miss out perhaps on views that are being expressed by the other committee, which might be relevant. So I think as officers, we're aware of the issue. I think it's really important that we do carry on facilitating training. And if there are areas, you've had touched on some, but if there are areas where members think they would like training, and I can think of quite a few off the top of my head, which might be relevant, then please let us know, because I think what we'll probably look to do, and it's just off the top of my head, is in some way facilitate small bite-sized trainings. I think some half days or days can be quite lengthy, but if we can try and set up maybe 45-minute hits, that's things I've done in the past, either before or after a committee maybe, and try and do it that way, and we'll see how it goes.
I've thought of another 2 site visits we did, the urban extensions up at Merley and Bear Wood, those huge sites, you know, that were just green fields. So to help us envisage, we could actually walk around and say, you know, this is where the community centre is going to be. This is where, you know, this is where the road's going to come through. That, you know, the absolute ones you couldn't possibly work out for yourself just from looking at plans and papers exactly how it was going to be. But as I say, they're pretty rare. Anyone else? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, on the subject of site visits again, often as a ward councillor, you might be invited by a resident to come and have a look at a planning application from their perspective. And, you know, that has happened to me on a few occasions. I think that's quite acceptable and okay to do, isn't it?
Sorry. I missed the question, I apologise.
Okay, so if you're invited as a ward councillor to come and visit a planning application site from the perspective of a resident who's objecting, is that okay to do?
So I'd make 2 comments on that. First of all, in the Constitution, members will find there's a general best practice guide for dealing with planning and planning matters. And I would urge members, and that's in part 6, I think, of the Constitution off the top of my head. And I would urge members to read that, because it does indeed address issues such as lobbying, which is essentially what you're sort of alluding to. I think the danger, if there is a danger with that, is a perception point. So if an applicant or a supporter of a scheme saw you being invited in to look at a particular, have a conversation with an individual objector, they might perceive that's an issue. They might think something's going on, or you're somehow siding with that person rather than just keeping an open mind on the situation. So while I can't tell you it's never possible to do it, what I'd say is I'd urge caution with it, because from a perception point of view, it's always dangerous to be seen to mixing with one party rather than with all parties in an open forum.
The other point I would make is that as far as possible, all members of the committee should have the same information in order to come to a decision. And if some of us have looked at things from a point like a neighbour's property that the whole committee hasn't had access to, it means we haven't all got the same information, which you know, it makes it more difficult, shall we say, because, you know, if one of us has been and seen something from the neighbouring house but the rest haven't, it's not a level playing field, and it means the rest of the committee is relying on the view of one member, which, you know, I find it slightly awkward.
Chair, in fact, that's I apologise, I should have made that point as well. It's a very good point. And I think in that sort of situation, probably the most sensible thing to do would be to encourage the person to liaise with the planning officer, because obviously the relevant planning officer can go out, take photographs, and they can be made available on the screen. And if for some reason or something special that did warrant a site visit, the officer could suggest it to members. But I think that's the safer route, because you're absolutely right. All members should have access to the same information.
And also on the subject of lobbying, all of us get lots of emails from people objecting. So, I mean, it's going to happen. So just because of receiving emails doesn't mean that we can't take part in the debate, does it?
Just receiving, no, I mean, again, Chair, if you look at the document which I referred to, it covers these sort of issues. one of the problems with receiving information exclusively is the very point the chair made. We want to make sure all members have access to all information that's relevant, and equally officers should be made aware of it. So if you get emails that are relevant, then really the thing to do is to draw it to the attention of the relevant planning officer, so they're aware of what's being said to you.
I try to remember every time I receive something, if it appears from the address, you can tell from the address list whether it's gone to officers, in which case that's fine. But if it appears to have only come to committee members, or maybe only you as an individual, I forward it to planning officers just to make sure that they are aware of it, and so that they can circulate it if they wish to the whole committee.
I just wanted to disagree slightly with what Rob said, that I think we get these requests as ward councillors, not as members of the planning committee. So I get contacted by a resident who says, my neighbour's doing this. And we had a group come into our surgery recently saying this is happening. Now, normally what happens, to be fair, is I step aside because I'm on the committee and my co-councillor takes that. But that isn't always the case. And that my duty as a ward councillor is to go and talk to my resident and say, what are you concerned about? And that's way before we even know if it's coming to planning committee, because it's not been through. And as for sending the planning officer, once you get beyond the period, the planning officer will not talk to anyone complaining, because I've been through that, and they won't talk to they won't come out when it's beyond the deadline. And often you don't know that. So I do think it's important that ward councillors do go and talk to residents, whether they are applicants or whether they're complainants. So I just think I want to make sure we're talking about the right thing here when you're saying that. And once it's on the agenda, I think that's completely different. But when there's an application, I think it's our duty to go and do that.
Chair, just a brief point. I mean, if a third party does approach a case officer, we'd always encourage them to go and look from their perspective. It allows the third party to know that they've had a fair hearing. It's helpful for Monica and myself if we're signing off an application, because they got a photo from that perspective. Also, it's really helpful in terms of dealing with any sort of later dissatisfaction complaint, local ombudsman issues, because we know we've done a thorough job and we can show that we understood all the factors. So yeah, if our advice would always be to officers, if there's a request to go and view it from next door's garden, they're absolutely to do that. Yeah, it's less hassle than not doing it.
Can I just add to this that we do not have a cut-off point in terms of not going out. If someone contacts us later than within the consultation period, the case officer firstly goes on site to the proper site visit, assessing the proposal from within the site and externally. If there's a need to visit the neighbour, even if it's after the consultation period, that is also taken into consideration. And in exceptional circumstances, sometimes the officer says, I've seen everything that I had to see. I don't need to go again. However, in many cases, my officers go on site and actually speak to neighbours, other representatives, and actually visit the site more than once to make sure that they've got enough information.
Sure, thank you for that. I mean, I'd like to think that is the case on everyone. I've definitely seen a couple where that hasn't been the case, but I think generally the officers I've dealt with have been very helpful. But I think when you're an objector, you seem to have no cards. You know the least about what is going on, and that's why I like to support the people who are actually questioning what's going on with the application, because they're not involved, they're just on the outside. And so I think it's quite important that we do engage with them. That's really my point.
I remember, if anyone is entitled to apply to speak, and they can supply photos, failing all else, they can come and speak to committee and say, look, this is what, this is the view, that sort of thing. If they, they've got to get in quick because it's, first come, first served, but that is another option.
Chair, I was going to say that, so coming back to the document which I referred you to, so I said you will find in there a range of different scenarios that it looks at, and it deals very much with the sort of scenarios you're talking about. I mean, what it says in very brief summary form is it recognises that lobbying is a part of the planning process. You can't get away from it. It is, lobbying of members generally happens. It recommends members need to always ensure they remain impartial. They recognise their role on planning committee is not one of negotiator. and they seek to avoid discussion in any detail relating to the application unless an officer is present. And that's primarily comes to the point I was making earlier about perceptions and not giving a perception of already predetermining your decisions. It then goes on to deal specifically with issues for lobbying of councillors appointed to the planning committee. It reinforces those points, and it goes on to explain that members should avoid saying things that could give an indication how that they're essentially predetermining the situation. They make clear any view they express is a preliminary view, and it goes on and it gives all these sort of recommendations and suggestions as to how to deal with those situations. So yes, it's accepted. We can't stop lobbying, but nor should we stop lobbying, because it's a relevant part of the councillor process. But it does set out all these guidelines, which hopefully avoid members having problems down the line when an application comes before committee.
If you go as a pair rather than going as a single, then it relieves some of that, doesn't it?
As I said, it's all about perception, and the danger is obviously you turn up by yourself and someone will say you said this or you said that, and that's all, or you give a false impression, and that's the risk. Now, I'm not saying what the outcome would be, but I'm just saying these are the risks, and that's why all this guidance exists, to try and help you as councillors avoid what is ultimately would be a code of conduct issue or potentially a judicial review against the council.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to go back to what Councillor Sidway was saying, because I think his point about your role as a ward councillor is actually very important, because we need to know exactly how involved we can get and you know what is appropriate really. And I think it is important to listen to our ward residents and you know, to sometimes, if it's appropriate, to have a look at an application before it comes to, or potentially might come to committee. So really, I just wanted to know what the boundaries were on that. But I think you've already said we need to refer to this document that you've quoted.
That's absolutely right, and obviously there will be cases, and the example was given where, frankly, it won't even be an application, so it's not you won't know why you're being asked to have a look at something. So clearly, it's not a bar or whatever doing these sort of things. It is all about just recognising the fact that if an item comes before committee, someone will look at your involvement, and someone might make an allegation or might suggest you closed your mind or all these issues, and this guidance hopefully will help you alleviate those sort of risks as best you can, and that's the best you can ever do. And if you're ever in any doubt, what I would say is liaise with the monitoring officer, because that's what the monitoring officer is here to do. So if you've got a particularly complex situation, you want to know how to behave or what's an appropriate thing to do, always feel free to contact the monitoring officer.
Councillor Cooper.
It's two things. I'll say the officer who's looking at the application that I was referring to did send me the constitution with very clear information. So I think that kind of stuff is a real training need. The other thing is about including the community, because 5 times I personally picked up the little yellow sign tied on with a little bit of flimsy plastic in very small text. So in that way, you know, in terms of diversity and people of sight and all this kind of stuff, lots of people don't know that this development is going to happen because they kept blowing away. And I just wondered whether we could improve how we communicate with the wards that are being impacted on by by developments, how they get the information, because it's sometimes nobody's objected to it. I should imagine no one's objected to it because hardly anybody knows about it really. Just the odd person who's interested in reading yellow posters on a lamppost.
I would say this is where your role as ward councillor comes in, to make sure if there's an application coming round that you let your residents know, and you know, impartially. I've done this many times. You know, if you want to comment, you know, and pointed out that 20 separate objections or representations, because it might be in favour, you never know, will trigger it coming to committee. So, you know, make sure if you think it's controversial, if you think there's an issue, make sure your residents know. So your role is not necessarily to take sides, but to inform and to let them take the action if they feel strongly enough. Because I mean, sometimes I've had applications come around in my ward in the past that I thought were not satisfactory, you know, not something I would want to, before I was on committee, or certainly before I was chair. But the residents, even though they knew about it, were quite happy about it. You know, you can't predict. But we are actually getting very much, I mean, although this has been very useful, we are actually well off the topic of site visits. So can we come back to site visits if anyone's got anything to say about the protocol? But it doesn't look as though anyone has. And the other one was the pre-app presentations. But since I can only think of one we've had. No, the Marks and Sparks one. Was that BCP? That was BCP on the Marks and Sparks site in Brom's town centre.
Are you sure that was?
I think that was pre-BC.
I'm sure we were in this building when we had it.
I don't recall one.
And it was Bournemouth anyway, so it wouldn't have been Paul. I mean, I was a Paul councillor, so I wouldn't have been involved if it was.
No,
it was Bournemouth. It was definitely for the Marks and Sparks site in Bournemouth town centre.
I don't think we've done one.
Yeah. But when it was,
I guess that shows they're pretty rare.
They are very rare. We had them a bit more often in Poole, but again, they were pretty rare. Yeah. So, if that's the end of the discussion, I can now say the meeting is formally closed. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.